It's time to talk about Queens of the Stone Age. This is a band that's hard to describe. They have a sound that's very unique. They're somewhere in that middle ground between rock and metal. They have a distinct style that borrows from many different genres. They have a new album out. It's called In Times New Roman. So let's talk about that. But first, a short history of the band. The band began back in the mid-90s after the breakup of the band Kyuss. That was this stoner rock band that was active in the early 90s. The man behind this was Josh Homme. After they broke up, they formed a new band called Gamma Ray, but there was already a band out there called Gamma Ray. You probably know them as the power metal band formed by Halloween's Kai Hansen. But what happened is the power metal band Gamma Ray threatened to sue the band unless they changed the name. And this is where they came up with Queens of the Stone Age. It was recommended by, I think, one of their managers. So anyway, after they began releasing albums, I would say they were at their peak in the early 2000s. Albums like Rated R and the song Feel Good Hit of the Summer, and the other album, Songs for the Deaf, maybe their most popular one, has songs like No One Knows and Go With The Flow. And after that, they've had some really good albums. I'd also like to mention Like Clockwork from 2014. I think that's a really good one. I started to prepare for this review the day before the album was released, and I actually listened to all of their albums, and it's been a while. I was a big fan of this band, but it's kind of one of those bands I kind of like forgot about for a little bit, and I haven't listened to them in a while. But I forgot how good these albums were. I think maybe the first four are really good, and I'll rank them eventually, but let's talk more about the new. The last time we heard from this band was when they released Villains in 2017. I remember this one very well. Back in 2017, I had just started this new job, and every time I got off the bus to go to work, I would see this big Queens of the Stone Age billboard with the album cover for Villains, and I like the artwork. It reminded me a lot of that movie Pan's Labyrinth. I remember I used to listen to this album a lot when it first came out. I thought it was good, not as good as some of the earlier ones, but it's pretty good. But this brings us to In Times New Roman, their 8th studio album released on June 16, 2023 through Matador Records. So the album was announced in a video teaser back in May of 2023, and it's their first album in about 6 years now. The band produced the album, and the mixing was done by Mark Rankin, and they recorded it at both the Josh Homme's Pink Duck Studios in Burbank, and as well as Rick Rubin's Shangri-La Studio in Malibu, California. So I thought that was very interesting. So let me read a quote from a review. The reviewer's name is Thomas Smith of NME, and he described it as a grotty listen using pain to encourage a rawness in their sound that's been absent since 2007's Era Vulgaris, and felt that with enough fan service for the diehards, this is up there with their darkest and naughtiest material to date, and it will be appreciated all the more for it. Okay, so before we move on, I want to just mention one more thing. One of their band members, Mark Lanigan, he actually passed away at the age of 57 back in February of 2022. And he was living in Killarney, Ireland. So I thought I just wanted to mention that. This was released on May 11th, 2023. So when I first heard this song, I thought it was a nice return to their early 2000s sound. I have been listening to it since then, and I thought it's a good song. I like the late 60s psychedelic rock sound that comes in after the chorus, and that part reminded me of the band Cream. I like the drumming on the song, and it has this bouncing rhythm. Second single, Carnivore, released on May 31st, 2023. I only heard the song a few days ago. I thought it was more experimental than the first single. It had this dark jazzy feel, if that makes sense. I thought the thick distorted bass sounded good along with the grungy rock guitars. The guitar sound also has this new wave or post-punk feel. The song's a little more laid back than the first single, but still a good song. And the third single, Paper Machete, released on June 14, 2023, which is just a few days ago. Really good song. It had that classic sound from the first 3 albums. There were more loud guitars, more grungy lead guitar fills. Josh Homme uses his signature falsetto vocals, and I thought the guitar solo was very good. It had like a very different type of solo, almost like this like Tom Morello type of solo, and probably my favorite of the three singles. Now let's talk about the other songs on the albums. So the first one is Obscenery, the opening track. I felt it was classic sounding Queens of the Stone Age. Josh Homme delivers his classic falsetto vocals with the distorted bass guitar sound. It's very futuristic sci-fi type of sound. There's also one part that sounded like the psychedelic Beatles in the middle of the song. I like the drum and bass interlude. Comes right in after the song, and the song has a mix of 90s grunge and 60s psychedelia combined with a classic sound. Then Negative Space is another song, had more of that classic sound. More of a grungy guitar-oriented sound, something that would fit on their first maybe 3 or 4 albums. I thought like the mix of the guitar, bass, and drums sounded very good on this one. And Time and Place, probably my favorite of the deep cuts or the non-singles, because they have this like one guitar playing like this one like time signature, then the rest of the band playing in like another. I think that was my interpretation of it. It was pretty cool just like listening to it. It's a very trippy kind of song. Josh Homme does the falsetto vocals. It's one of the more like psychedelic songs on the album. He also does some vocals, kind of reminded me of like this Alice in Chains, Lane Staley kind of thing, and it had like this 90s alternative or noise rock type of sound. And the drum beat was also pretty interesting. It had like a very like unique type of rhythm to it. Made to Parade, another song with that classic sound. I felt this one had like this bouncy rhythm, and you know, when he was singing like these verses, like in like these short bursts, followed by very trippy and psychedelic sound in the chorus. I thought this was more on the experimental side, and Josh Homme has more of like a baritone style in the song. And What the People Say was more upbeat and danceable. But this was probably closer to that sound they had on Villains, the last album, kind of mix of alternative and punk. I thought the song was pretty good. I mean, not one of my favorites, but it's good. I like the distorted bass sound, and it has like this like jangly guitar sound. Then Sicily was a cool song, one of the slower songs. Had quieter parts that were more atmospheric and strange. Kind of an acid trip of a song, had a dreamy quality to it and some grungy undertones. And Straight Jacket Fitting, the final song was a 9-minute closer. Another trippy song that brings back some of their stoner rock sound. It's a slow-paced song with lots of psychedelic guitar playing and falsetto vocals. There are parts of the song that have loud grungy guitars. This reminded me of one of the longer songs by like The Doors, when Jim Morrison is kind of like speaking his thoughts out loud. Kind of reminded me of that. I think at the 7-minute mark, it kind of like goes into this instrumental, which is like psychedelic acoustic guitar strumming and trippy background melodies. And just like the last part is instrumental, then the song ends. So let me sum this up. It's a really good return to form. I wasn't like super enthusiastic about their last album, Villains, and yeah, I'm a big fan of this band, especially like the first 4 albums. I like them a lot, and I thought this was a good return to form. And I think it ranks up there with maybe some of their later albums. But I thought it was really good, really great, like alternative rock sound. Like some of the songs were heavier but it's a very like moody and dark album. It's like a lot of like more atmospheric parts, a lot more like trippier and that like stoner rock. It's not really as much as like their earlier albums throughout the whole thing, where they had this like alternative, like grungy sound that kind of was similar to like Nirvana at times. But this was more of like a trippy psychedelic type of album mixed with that like grungy sound. And I guess that's how I would describe it. So my final score is an 8 out of 10. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Please remember to like the video. It helps me with the algorithm. Please comment. I like to respond to comments and let me know what you think of this. You know, where would you rank it? I'll probably do a ranking eventually. And I haven't done any other Queens of the Stone Age reviews, so I'll put something related. I'll stick it right over there if you want to watch it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.